Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a homicide.
There are 7 deadly sins, Captain. Gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, pride, lust, and envy. 7. You can expect 5 more of these.
You want to come take a look at this?
Oh, good.
He's 2 murders away from completing his masterpiece.
Let's finish it. Brad Pitt. Morgan Freeman.
This isn't gonna have a happy ending.
7, rated R.
Hello, and welcome to episode 26 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks, we'll take a randomly selected movie from our collection, and we'll review it ourselves. I'm Brian Morgan, and sadly, the special thing that we posted about on Facebook did not happen, so joining me, not directly to my left, but from the left coast, is Dan Bergman. Say hi, Dan.
Hey.
To our listeners, I had posted on Facebook that we had something special in mind for episode 27, and that something special was going to be an in-person episode where both Dan and I were in the same room, but that didn't work out the way we had hoped, so hopefully in the future we'll be able to pull something off.
Yeah, standby travel is an imperfect science, so...
Yeah, well, it's also seasonal.
Yeah, well, as my cousin said, getting a flight on standby status is like winning the lottery. So, you got to play to win. You don't always win.
You can't win if you don't play. That's what the commercials keep telling me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to fly first class some other time.
Yeah, bummer.
For $30,
Yeah. But that's something to look forward to, again, for our listeners and for us. Dan does live 3,000 miles away, and that is a bit of an issue sometimes.
But we make it work.
We do. I think we're doing a good job. I mean, we're getting episodes out generally on time, if that guy that edits them can, keep up with himself. All right, so episode 26. We're talking about Seven. We were so close to getting episode 27 to be 20 off of the name of the movie, but we just missed. Bummer. I had a really good joke lined up and everything.
Oh, we could have had it. Could have been a contender. We could have been something.
We are something. We're nearly 500 downloads. So
all right, that's something.
Share us with your friends and help us get over that hump. But before we start talking about the movie, we have to go to our listener feedback. And if everyone recalls from episode 25, and if you missed it, I will go over it again. We are doing listener selections on our episodes that end with 5 and 0. So episode 30 will be a randomly selected listener inputted movie. Inputted, is that a word? Can I say
Oh,
inputted?
sure, it works.
I think I just did. Well, I think everyone knows what I mean. So communication has taken place. So through email and various forms of communication, we have received Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which is pretty recent. And do you own that one
I
yet,
do.
Dan?
I bought
Yeah,
that the
so
day
do I.
after it came out. It was a little slow.
So did I.
Yeah, usually I get it the day of, but...
We also have Deadpool suggested and John Wick.
Okay. I don't own Deadpool. I do own John Wick.
Oh, well, see, I own Deadpool. I don't
Okay.
own John Wick. So we're covered on both fronts.
Good to go.
John Wick has been on television a number of times, though, because the Chapter 2 came out. So even if I don't, it's available in a streaming service that I have access to, or I kind of enjoyed the movie, I might just buy it.
I think it's good. I think that they're selling it for a relatively low price nowadays, so I think it's worth it.
Yeah, well, at least one of us owns it, so...
Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree, because it's kind of a fun movie. Again, not spoiling it for the potential of it showing up in episode 30, but we have it on the list, and we will randomly select one of those movies in episode 29 and talk about it in episode 30. So we got that to look forward to. Also, on our listener feedback, we have some feedback from Jeff Edwards on our War for the Planet of the Apes. Again, not Battle for the Planet of the Apes, although interestingly enough, if we're talking about other movies, his comment on our Facebook page was the comment about debate for the Planet of the Apes made coffee come out of his nose. I told him we hoped he didn't need medical care, and also suggested Navage, if you're familiar with that.
I'm not, but I can guess what it is.
It's a nasal rinse thing.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing.
And that was the only listener feedback we got. Actually, somebody chatted with me and said that during War for the Planet of the Apes, we were talking about Black Panther because it had come out recently and that sort of thing. And he let me know that he did not care for Black Panther. I said, okay, cool. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, so thanks for sharing that with us. And eventually we will be reviewing Black Panther, I suppose.
Oh, yeah,
because
I'm definitely
going
gonna
to
buy
buy it. So there's that. And I'm definitely looking forward to Avengers Infinity War coming out because at the time of this recording, it had not yet come out. So future people, let us know if it's good. Don't spoil it, though. Don't spoil it.
What do we want? Time travel. When do we want
It's
it?
irrelevant. Interestingly enough, there was a letter from Thanos, who is the big bad in Avengers Infinity War. Have you seen that?
No.
I heard about it. I haven't seen it either, but it says #Thanos demands your silence. And it's basically saying don't spoil the movie for your friends or for the internet or whatever. Let everybody enjoy the movie for the first time. So
yeah. That was nice of him. I
Yeah.
guess he's not such a bad guy after all.
Yeah, for wanting to destroy half the universe as espoused in one of the commercials. Maybe he'll... Maybe that's the half of the universe he wants to destroy, is the people that give out spoilers.
Yeah, I'm about to say, if he's selective about it, yeah, we got some suggestions.
I have collected 6 of the most powerful artifacts in the entire multiverse. You spoil a movie, you're going away.
Yes.
Ooh, don't abuse that power.
It's funny that we're talking about it. You actually mentioned Thanos by name. I had come across on the website, This Is Why I'm Broke. You can buy a pretty nice-looking Infinity Gauntlet replica with really nice-looking Infinity Stone gems for $930.
That's it?
That's it. It's a beautiful replica, and yeah, $930.
Nice.
So if any of you out there has $930 just lying around, hey.
And want to buy me something special?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, my birthday's passed, but Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, they're all coming up soon,
Yeah, exactly. The season for giving gifts never ends.
And never.
I was actually at a local comic book store the other day, and I was looking for a comic book. For our listeners, I collected comic books when I was a kid. I still have a bunch of them, and I was actually looking for one that I had a sentimental attachment to, and I happened to go with my daughter and her boyfriend, and I had them digging through the dollar bins because I expect that the comic book I'm looking for is going to be in the dollar bin, and I don't mind paying $1 for a 30-year-old comic book because it has a sentimental attachment, and it was a story that I really cared for. So if any of our listeners have New Mutants 45 from the 80s, go ahead and send that to me. Just PM me at our Facebook page, and I will happily follow that link and pick it up. A real quick side story. We'll call it a sea story because I was at sea. I was taking a college English course on deployment in 1994, and I had written an essay about comic books and their actual value because I think we talked about this on one of our previous episodes about how movies will approach things in a way that you might not think about. The fundamental premise of my essay was that comic books have been doing that sort of thing for decades, and I actually was able to change a friend's mind about comic books with that essay, so I was kind of excited about it. And one of the stories that I related, or one of the comic books that I spoke about in that, was that New Mutants 45. So that's why I'm looking for it. It has a sentimental value to me. It's a good story, and I want to have it. So there.
Right. Cool.
That has nothing to do with listener feedback and nothing to do with this movie, but it was a fun story. So
no, that's a good story.
But it was fun, having my 17-year-old daughter and her boyfriend digging through the dollar bin. They're like, what are we looking for again? This is what it looks like. Just look for that. You'll find, and let me know.
Nothing like having good, cheap labor,
Mm-hmm. And actually, the whole reason that I brought up that story was not to... looking for the comic book was sort of what we were doing, but they have a life-size Spider-Man mannequin, like in a pose, and I looked at my daughter and said, hey, you know when my birthday is, and let me just say, if you're looking for ideas, I'll take the 5'10" Spider-Man statue. That would be cool. I could put it in the man cave, or my studio, whichever you want to call it. But
it can go by many names.
It can. It's flexible. So, let's move on to talking about Seven.
Let's do so.
I guess still talking about listener feedback, we did get some conversation about Seven going on the Facebook page back during our The Heat episode 15. So that was about, that was in October of last year. So I will be referring to that feedback just a little bit when we get to that point in the conversation, so just keep that in mind. We will be talking about previous listener feedback about this movie, even though we didn't do a podcast on it yet.
I was wondering if they were going to come up, because I thought about it, but I didn't access them, and I thought, we'll just,
I went back and specifically went looking for them because I thought it would be relevant in talking about how we talk about movies and how, 23 years later, we're still talking about this movie. In a way that is still relevant. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody walk up to another human with a box and somebody's going, what's in the box?
Mm-hmm.
Or even when the SWAT guys are going, we got a box!
Mm-hmm.
I still do it.
I had recently posted a meme on Facebook where it's just like it was the last few scenes of the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks when he gives the box, he leaves it on the doorstep, and then we never find out what's in it, and it just cuts to Brad Pitt. What's in the fucking box? And I'm surprised nobody had done that yet, after all these years.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't want to know, Brad. You just don't want to know.
Yeah, compared to what he had in his box, it's like, does it really matter what's in Tom Hanks's box?
True. I know, again, we're spoiling the end of the movie, so let's just jump to the box scene, shall we?
Why not?
Yeah, so interesting point of trivia. The writer wrote the original draft with the Gwyneth Paltrow's head in a box scene, and the studio said, hey, you need to make this a little less depressing at the end. So he rewrote it, and when they finally picked it up and he sent the script to the producer, he sent the wrong script. He didn't send the rewrite, he sent the original. And the director/producer said, oh, no, I'm making this movie. This is the movie that I'm making. And he had to convince the studio to let him make the movie in its original draft. So the box scene was originally in it, and then it was cut, and then accidentally got put back in, and it's one of the most memorable and powerful scenes in the entire movie. So good, happy accidents do happen.
That's the thing, though. Doing this podcast, watching a lot of my, analysis videos on YouTube. I got a lot of different channels I look at, and they talk about, the making of a movie, the ideas behind it, and everything. And I start to realize that a lot of movies that took the biggest risks, the ones where everyone said, nope, not going to work, this is stupid, no one's going to understand it, no one's going to like it, no one, and fill in the blank, but they do it anyways. It ends up being like the greatest scene or movie or musical score, and the biggest example, of course, of that is Star Wars, where nobody wanted to make George Lucas's silly little space movie, and finally they said, all right, look, you made us some money with American Graffiti, go ahead and make your little movie and then shut up about it. And it ended up being the biggest cultural phenomenon the world has ever seen.
That and Jaws fundamentally changed the way we look at movies, or the way studios looked at movies.
Yeah, and even when you have something that is arguably the most successful movie franchise, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 18 movies, all of them great, we're anticipating Infinity War, but the one thing that they kind of faulted on was the musical score. And I watched this analysis that, it started out where he walked around like parks and malls and asking people, hum something from Star Wars, hum something from Indiana Jones or from Jaws. Nobody could do it for any Marvel movie. And he went to go say that most of the musical scores within Marvel movies are safe. They're very innocuous. They don't take any risks and everything, not like all the other movies that I mentioned, everything like that. And he says, no, that's not to say that these are bad movies. It's just that this is the one aspect they didn't really take a risk on.
But for the most part, they're safe movies anyway. You generally know that the good guy is going to win, generally.
Generally.
Or at the very least, they're going to defeat the villain or achieve their victory. They may end up where the villain gets away or whatnot, but they're going to win. They're going to go through some internal struggle and, come out better on the other side. It's reasonably formulaic, but they're fun. So, I mean, the score, I can pick out the movies, but I was sitting there thinking while you were talking about it, and I don't know right in the here and now that I could hum something. And I've watched those movies at least a dozen times each, with a few minor exceptions. I mean, you say they're all really good movies, but some are better than others.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of have to be, but...
Well, that's to say, none of them are absolutely terrible. There aren't throwaway movies like, like a lot of people with Star Wars, they would say that episode 1 is probably the most throwaway episode of the whole bunch.
Maybe. But even then, you can still hum some of the music because there's a lot of themes that continually recur. So.
Oh yeah, I often hum the Battle of the Fates.
Oh yeah,
Choral.
That is one of the best pieces of music to come out of Star Wars, and that's out of arguably one of the crappiest movies. So,
Yeah.
Or at least one of the 3 crappiest movies.
Yeah, it's funny how episode 1 of Star Wars is the throwaway, and so is episode 1 of Star Trek. Star Trek: The Motion Picture was easily the most throwaway of all the Star Trek films.
See, again, we've talked about this before. I actually like the movie, even though it was originally supposed to be the pilot episode for the television series Star Trek II. That was the plan. They were just going to, get the cast together and make another couple of years worth of shows or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I like Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I mean, again, I was at the right age for that to be something I was interested in, and it was kind of fun. So maybe I'm looking at it through the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia, but I still enjoy watching it. It's been on a couple of times, and I'll stop and, let it play through to the end. So I like it. So what does that have to do with Seven?
Nothing.
How did we get on this subject?
we're just going off.
Totally walking everywhere else except for, well, we were talking about memorable scenes and memorable.
Yes.
And that's shifted
Yeah,
to memorable
there was.
music.
Yeah, we definitely veered off course. And then I guess that's much credit to how memorable scene and how impactful it is to our culture that it knocked us so far off course.
Yes, its power put us into another plane of existence or something. I'm not really sure.
That's a good way to look at it.
So I know we haven't really asked this question in a while, but how did this hold up on a rewatch?
This movie in general? Oh my goodness. I think this is one of the few movies that doesn't get played. Okay, let me back up here a little bit and everything. I think I've mentioned before, sometimes I do what I call short attention span theater, where I'll just watch a few scenes for a movie. I dare say that this is probably one of the few movies I don't do that with.
Because you got to watch from front to back.
I have to watch the whole thing. It's to me, it's that engaging. It's that much of a hook. I just cannot watch just one scene. I have to watch the whole thing.
And you know what's interesting about that is you can pick up this movie anywhere, in the sense that if it's on television and you stop, you can immediately go, okay, they're here. All right, this is what I have left. Good, I'm in. I'm just going to watch this. Or at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to watch it from front to back, but if I can catch the beginning all the way to the end, I will sit down and not move for close to 2 hours.
Yeah, it's just not something you can walk away from.
And this movie, for me, always holds up on a rewatch because it's a movie that I rewatch often. Probably once a year or so, I will watch it, and even more so catch parts of it because if it's on, I'll stop because I find this movie fascinating. And that's actually one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about. I think a lot of people find this movie fascinating because of the serial killer aspect, and that is a part of it, and there's some other parts that we'll talk about later on. It's fascinating to me because of the serial killer, but it's also interesting that people are so intrigued by serial killers. It's a common theme. As I've mentioned before, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the things that is popping up with a lot of frequency, or is popping up more and more, are true crime podcasts, where people will talk about murderers, about serial killers, and it's exploding. It's the new hotness, if you will. Which, ironically, is not a new hotness, is not a word that is currently in vogue in the vernacular, but that's okay. But people are fascinated by sociopaths that go to that degree, and I kind of wanted to talk about why I think they are and see why you think so, if you know what I'm talking about. Because I know you have an interest in serial killers.
Oh, yeah. You've known about that for a long time.
Yeah, I remember a couple of trips down to the Museum of Death in San Diego and walking through Serial Killer Row. John Wayne Gacy, I think Jeffrey Dahmer was in there. All the bigs.
All the big names. Everybody was there. The who's who in murder.
Exactly. But why does it fascinate you in particular? Because I think that's part of the allure for you for this movie. It has to be. I mean, knowing you.
For me, there's no easy answer on this one because people ask me this a lot. I mean, you ask it in a very intellectual and serious manner, and I've always been asked, like, by my mother, like, why do you like this? It's like, the whole spectrum of questions and motivations about that. I don't have an easy answer other than just it's an interest to see such an alien behavior. Not just what motivates these people, because the more you read about them, sometimes you kind of understand some of their motivations. I'm just saying, not saying I'd ever act on it, but you understand. I'm not saying it's right, but I understand. But just the ability to be so calm and to commit such horrible acts, and to think that that's nothing. That mindset is such an alien concept to someone who still it has a firm grasp on their humanity. And you want to know it's alien territory. It's the same reason why I'd want to talk to an alien, because it's like it's such a different thought process, it's such a different way of looking at things. Unless that alien comes out and says, "Yeah, you guys are exactly like us," and I'm like, boring, It's like, but seriously,
all right, you guys can go home now.
Yeah, you traveled
3
billion light years, and you're saying you're just exactly like us. Go home.
Great. Well, yeah, what we don't have is faster than light travel. You jackass. I think for me,
faster than light travel, and you're still here.
Interesting. I just heard that scientists were able to shoot neutrinos at CERN, and they achieved faster than light speeds, and neutrinos have mass. So
I wonder if that's an old story resurfacing because that got debunked, or is this another attempt that the guy came up with different results?
I think it was another attempt. I could be wrong about that. I remember I read the article this morning, and I don't remember the date on it. So maybe, I don't know, listeners, if you feel like telling us that neutrinos have mass and can't go faster than the speed of light because of Einstein's general relativity theory, or E = mc squared, the most famous equation on the planet, which is not mentioned in this movie at all. Here we go again. Which is funny because we normally we go on these tangents about movies that we don't have a lot of feeling for. And I'll tell you, again, slightly spoiling my take at the end, I love this movie. And I love it because of the serial killer aspect. Again, that's part of it. But for me, this exploration of the determination, patience, and conviction that John Doe exhibits to commit the crimes that he does, particularly the Sloth murder, which is a full year. It takes a full year for him to achieve that victory. And that is not, as Detective Somerset says, something that a lunatic would pull off.
No.
You know,
And again, that's the fascination. This is depicting a character, like you said, who had the patience, the conviction, the wherewithal to continue a routine to make sure that things went down just the way he wanted them to. I don't have that. Making monthly payments on my car were difficult.
As you were saying earlier that, you're surprised we got to 26 episodes. That requires a certain level of conviction. So I think you do have it. You just don't have it in a way that's going to allow you to commit a particularly brutal murder.
Yeah, by the way, again, this is on subject, but shifting gears a little bit. I don't think the movie actually portrayed the sloth victim dying.
No, he didn't. He died. He said he wasn't going to make it through the night, so he died, but he didn't die on camera. There was no announcement that he died, but it was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, so it's Schrodinger's victim here. It's like he's both dead and alive at the same time.
And he played the piano. Oh, that's Schroeder. I'm sorry. But, again, the level of conviction that it takes to day after day after day and to take the pictures. The interesting thing about this movie and how serial killers are normally portrayed in various media, they tend to be meticulous and very, not OCD, but very order and detail oriented. And when they go into John Doe's apartment, it's kind of a shambles. I mean, things are where they're supposed to be, and he does have the room of notebooks, but again, one of the things that Somerset says, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these notebooks, all placed in no discernible order. They're just on the shelf. He is an aberration in the cinema representation of serial killers because he's not a neatnik. He's not neat and orderly. It's organized chaos is what it is. I'm sure he could find what he's looking for, but no one else can.
In John Doe's defense, though, it has been cited and written about that a lot of geniuses are messy people.
That would explain my man cave.
No, but they say that people who are incredibly intelligent and organized in some other aspect of their lives tend to be disheveled in other aspects.
I think it's kind of a balance.
It is. So I mean, that's why I don't see John Doe's apartment being in shambles to be too much of a contradiction in his character. He's methodical in other areas and neglectful in others.
I don't see it that way either. I was merely making it a point from the presentation standpoint that it's different, which again intrigues me about the character because it shows a certain difference from what I've seen before. That's part of the draw. I think that that Kevin Spacey did an absolutely fantastic job in this movie, portraying that seething rage just below the surface, that diatribe that he goes off on in the car when he talks about the woman who is so ugly on the inside that she can't bear to not be beautiful on the outside. All of the things that he says kind of, you can see his point. You can see that these are not paragons of virtue, if you will. But the thing that he misses is that they're human. And human beings are flawed creatures. That's what we are. I think that's what this movie explores because you see each one of these characters, or well, not each one of these. You see Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman make character shifts in a direction towards the end of the movie. So the biggest one is by Morgan Freeman's character because John Doe ends up dead. So that, I guess that's a shift in his character, but not really one he's going to be able to recover from.
Well, it depends how you look at it.
You were going to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, though, the point you made, the one thing that he misses, he forgets that they're all human. And I think that's a consistency with, and I know this is going to probably piss off a lot of people, so here we go, I'm going to say it, with a lot of biblical interpretations. In the sense that you look at the Ten Commandments, and I grew up thinking that the one command, thou shalt not kill. But I was told later on that its actual translation is thou shalt not murder.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah. And when I was told that, then everything became so much clearer, because you find all kinds of killing in the Bible. You find all kinds of killing in history in the name of the Bible. And that's because murder is a negotiable concept. I mean, even in our own law, the simple act of killing doesn't necessarily constitute murder. Was it self-defense? Was it justifiable homicide? Was it in the line of duty? Was it homicidal negligence, which isn't necessarily murder, but it's manslaughter? You know, it's negotiable. It's open to interpretation. So for someone who thinks the way that John Doe does, someone's humanity and whether or not he's committing quote-unquote murder is negotiable based on his beliefs, what he's doing.
But even so, he takes it to the level where he recognizes that in the eyes of most, this is wrong. But he is doing it to prove a point. This is his work.
Well,
this is his job. He is, as they say in the movie a number of times, he is preaching. You know, don't be these people. Nothing but bad things can happen because of that. So his murder, his killing, is completely rationalized.
Yeah, the thing is that, though, you said, it's like, you know, his understanding that other people find his deeds wrong doesn't necessarily mean he shares those views. I can understand that somebody feels premarital sex is wrong. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to follow that. I understand it's wrong. Doesn't mean I share that. Doesn't mean I'm going to hold back.
And that's the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. A sociopath knows it's wrong, but does it anyway. It's like, yeah, I know people think is right and wrong. I just don't care.
Yeah, well, that's the thing again, though. He doesn't. It's like it's not that he doesn't care. It's just he finds it irrelevant because he feels, well, you're committing sin. You negate your right to say what's right or wrong. You know, it's like you've given up that thing. You're a sinner. You're no longer a human being. To him, you're a sinner, and you must be made an example of, and I'm going to do my job.
Yeah, exactly. That to him rationalizes it because, again, Old Testament, real wrath of God type stuff. You know, in the Old Testament, it was perfectly okay to stone somebody. You know, that wasn't murder. That was killing because they had committed a sin. Even in some cultures, it's still okay to stone people. It's justifying killing someone because of a sin, not murdering them. You're not murdering them. You're killing them. You're punishing them.
And again, there's the negotiation. You know, killing doesn't.
Right. Which goes to, you know, different levels of killing. You know, is it murder? Is it murder? Is it murder 1? Is it murder 2? Is it manslaughter, as you'd said earlier? Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
Or is it justifiable homicide? In which case, you go free.
Yeah.
No problem. You did all right.
And they write songs about it. It was a justifiable Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, from the serial killer aspect, though, we can look at John Doe's reasoning and kind of understand it. It's not something that we would do, but it's definitely a rationale that we can look at and go, yeah, you know what? I don't like ugly people like that, but I wouldn't kill them over it, or I wouldn't shove spaghetti down their throat, or, you know, who likes lawyers? But still, what he did to that defense lawyer is not something that we would ever think about doing because we just don't have that level of disgust, I guess, is kind of where it goes.
Well, you know, the thing that came to mind, too, when I was thinking about, you know, this movie, about our discussion, too, it's like, you know, I found an unlikely relationship between this movie, at least its characters, and how they deal with the situation that's put before them. And the movie that I found to be an unlikely companion piece was The Dark Knight.
Okay, how so?
Because you have John Doe and you have the Joker. Both of them, they have a message. Not necessarily the same message, but they're both trying to get together a message. And the thing that both movies are dealing with is the apathy. You hear Somerset talk about, you know, the apathy like it's a virtue and how that's a problem. And the Joker, he shows that, you know, it's like if you just give everybody just a little push and they'll just drive them into insanity because, you know, nobody cares about own up or whatever. And they lose their minds over the dumbest things and everything. It's just, I didn't say it was a good relationship. I just said there was a relationship, but I mean, you see where I'm getting at, though? I mean,
I see that they both have a theme. I see that they both have a theme that is presented in an understandable way because there is a certain degree of cynicism involved there where with the Joker, some people, I do agree, if you just, you give them a push, they're over the edge. And you're like, oh no, yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though, and I think this is where I was, like, really kind of circling. It's the sense about, again, people... Okay, let me back up. Let me backtrack a little bit here. You were asking me why I find serial killers, by relationship, John Doe so fascinating, everything. And I guess you can also ask that as like, why do people find the character of the Joker so fascinating? It's like because, they're so alien. I say because their mindsets are so alien and everything. And sometimes I wonder if people want to be like them in a sense, not necessarily bloodthirsty murderers or anything, but in a sense, more free than we could ever be to do things that we are always told are wrong, but they do it so freely. They don't care, and especially like I said, in this culture of apathy and what's the catchphrase? Oh, zero F's given. I don't care. Nothing bothers me. And if something does bother you, you're too sensitive. You're a snowflake. And here are these people who honestly do things because they don't care. And then they try to show that the rest of us don't care. And sometimes, when you're watching a movie like this, you're thinking, yeah, maybe I don't. But ultimately, you do. And, when you talk about, holding on to somebody's humanity and everything like that, it's like if John Doe was to put that test that the Joker did, with the bombs and the trigger and everything like that, I think the people in Seven would probably fail the same way they did in The Dark Knight. They didn't pull the trigger. They wouldn't prove him right. But ultimately, they talk up a good storm. Hey, man, those prisoners, they had their chance. I'll pull the trigger. Nobody wants to get their hands dirty. But when it comes down to it, they couldn't do it. And because they can't do it, they look at someone like the Joker. They look at someone like John Doe, who obviously can pull the trigger and does. And it's almost like there's a deep admiration for that.
So I think you're onto something in a way, because I do believe that when people look at movies like this, and again, using your example of John Doe and the Joker, they see a smidgen of something that they admire, and it is that freedom. You're not beholden to a set of societal rules. You craft your own rules, and you do what you want to do, and people want to be free. They don't necessarily want to be free to murder people or free to start fires and blow things up, but they want to be out from under the thumb of the man. They want to be out from under the workaday stresses of 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, doing whatever it is they do. There's a certain appeal to that, and I understand that. But the reason they make these movies is because it gives us that escapism to, for just a little bit, live outside of ourselves and kind of touch that uncomfortable place where you can look at something and go, oh, yeah, that's not the kind of freedom that I really want. I just want, a little more freedom than what I have. So it gives them a perspective. It gives them a look into something that they can't do. When I say can't, I don't mean physically, because I'm pretty sure, if you planned everything out the right way, you could murder as many people as you want. In fact, I sat at the dinner table with my kids and planned out the perfect murder one time. It involved paper plates and piranhas, but I mean, whatever. It's all good. There's a lot of work involved.
We had the perfect plan of eliminating our captain one time, but no, I don't talk about
that. That sounds
no.
bad.
Well,
Don't
we
do that.
didn't obviously, but over the Marianas Trench, weighted jacket. He fell overboard and he sank. Huh?
But again, it's that moment of introspection when you realize, yeah, that's a little much. But the degree to which John Doe goes in this movie, again, like I said, that planning that year-long murder, the lust murder, when he gets that leather strap-on thing,
blade,
that device, yeah, that's the kind of thing that you're like, oh, yeah, I like to think I'm a little evil, but yeah, you win. You win. So the other aspect of this is seeing the same qualities in the other characters, because the three main characters in this movie, John Doe, William Somerset, and David Mills, are different variations of the same person. Because John Doe is methodical and calculating. He plans things out. William Somerset is methodical and planning. He works things out. It is the positive and the negative of both of those characteristics in a human. John Doe is emotional, but he controls it. David Mills is emotional, but doesn't control it. He is the emotional antithesis. He's the balance for that. So when you put those three characters together, if you shift a little bit from each one, they would actually make three normal humans. If you gave David Mills a little bit of the control that John Doe and William Somerset have, you would fix his character. That's where he needs to be a more balanced person. Somerset, and you see his character shifting along the way over the 7 days of these murders, which, I don't know that I'd ever actually paid that much attention to how many times the number 7 shows up in this movie, aside from the title and the 7 sins and all that kind of stuff. Somerset has 7 days until he retires. The box had to be delivered at 7 o'clock. 7 is a recurring theme in several things throughout the movie. It was just kind of fun.
Wouldn't it be funny if it only happened 7 times?
But you see over the 7 days, Somerset go from near apathy with a modicum of concern to a more caring individual when he doesn't retire, because he realizes that he has to continue doing what he's doing in much the same way that R. Lee Ermey tells him, you were built for this. This is what you were made to do. And that is use that big brain of yours to try and exact justice. Because he even says it in the movie, you follow these crimes and you find the person and get that little bit of, vengeance for the victims. So he recognizes that within himself, and he'd lost it somewhere. Maybe he was the idealist at the beginning of his career, but it takes a very methodical planning person to go sit at a library and plow through Chaucer and Dante and all of the other books that he dug through, where nowadays you would Google it on the internet. David Mills is everyman. He's the guy that wants to just mete out justice. He's the hero in us. He wants to go find the bad guy and put him in jail, and it doesn't matter really how it happens, and he wants to take shortcuts to do it. So he read the Cliff's Notes, and he was good to go.
Gotcha.
And that actually kind of goes back to the feedback that we were alluding to earlier, and it's from Jeff Edwards. And, Jeff's take on Somerset is that he's an introspective, complex, well-read character, and he understands the dark side of the human spirit, and he's incredibly self-aware, so he gets his own darkness. Brad Pitt's character is brash, overconfident, and prone to follow his impulses, regardless of the consequences. Jeff says if you combine their characters, you end up with John Doe, who displays every major trait of their different personalities. And that's kind of why I explain them as a triangle. All three share characteristics, but each one has an overpowering piece. That they have commonalities. The methodical nature, as I spoke of, the emotional nature that I spoke of. They are a triangle with lines pointing out from the convergence of each of the lines to take those characteristics to the extreme.
If I recall, I had a bit of a dispute with Jeff on that, though. That I didn't see a lot of Mills's character in John Doe. I did not see any evidence of the impulsiveness and his gung-ho nature. I didn't see any of that in John Doe. I don't know if I couldn't fully agree with him on that.
You saw it start to burst through, like I said, during his diatribe about innocent victims.
That was more closer to Somerset's. It wasn't just like, I'm just going to kick in the door because it's something to do. It was, okay, this is something specific I am responding to, which is more akin to Somerset's, for lack of a better term. It is his diatribe in the bar with Mills about, you can't be this monumentally naive. And Mills is, yeah, you just want to say everything's all messed up, but it just simply isn't that way, and it's like, but really, have you thought that out? It's like, it seems to me that Somerset and John Doe have put a lot more thought into the situation, whereas you are just like, ah. And that's why I don't see a whole lot of Mills in John Doe. That's what I see.
Yeah, but again, it goes to why Mills is wrath in the first place. There is a certain degree of envy in John Doe. He envies him his normal life, but he also envies his ability to let go his emotions.
Yeah, he envies it because he doesn't have it. Again, it's just like we say why we like serial killers, because it's something that we're not. That's why we like heroes in movies, because there's something that we're not. They have things we don't.
But he has the emotion. What Somerset has buried is the emotion. What Mills has in spades is that emotion. What John Doe has is the emotion, but he doesn't know how to specifically address it in a way that's healthy. When he starts to get angry in the car, you can tell that there's a raging human inside of there waiting to come out. When he goes into the police station and he raises his voice to say, "Detective," that is him raging. He wants to let that out. That's the, look, you will pay attention to me. That is controlled rage right there. That's emotion. That's him looking for attention.
Okay, I'll agree with you. That's emotion, but that is not rage. Rage is, I was like, believe me, I've had emotional problems and everything. I know what rage is, and that's not rage. Anger, and it's like you said, it's very controlled. Anger and rage are two separate things. They're not the same thing. You can be angry at something, and I say the difference with John Doe is when he expresses anger, nobody tells him to calm down. He does it himself.
Because he has Somerset's control.
Well, yeah, we're talking about the relationship between him and Mills. When Mills does his rage,
right,
he ends up destroying something. He ends up nearly kicking the photographer, who turns out to be John Doe, down the stairs. He kicks in the door. He ends up nearly getting killed. He gets a crowbar across his face and everything because it's uncontrolled. It's rage. You don't have that in John Doe. You may have anger, but that's all it is.
Okay, so there is the scene where they're in the apartment after Mills kicks down the door, and they are going through all of the rooms, and Mills walks in, and Somerset is flipping through one of the notebooks. And he asks him a question, and Somerset does not answer the question directly. He reads from the book. I was on the subway today, or on the bus, and a man started speaking to me, and the conversation was so banal, was so banal, that I threw up on his shoes, and I couldn't stop laughing. That was rage. That was controlled rage that caused him to have a violent physical reaction. The writing, and I know a weird trivia moment, those notebooks are actually filled with writing. That's not just gibberish. That's not just printed. Some guy at the prop studio sat down for like 2 straight months and wrote all of that crap. So there's stuff in those notebooks, hundreds of them. Again, weird things when you find out when you're Googling. But that is controlled rage. It takes a strong emotion to keep you pushing through writing that small on that many pages for that long. That is controlled rage. That's not just anger. That's not just, I want to write really small on a piece of paper. You have to be incredibly emotionally involved in something to do something to that degree.
Okay, but I again, based on my personal experience, everything, you're using two words that do not go together. Control and rage. Rage is a loss of control.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot of anger. There was a violent physical reaction, when he vomits on somebody, yes. But again, I strongly disagree that rage is, by definition, a loss of control. When you go into a rage, it's like when somebody talks about roid rage, it's like it's not just a control, like, okay, I feel like being angry and destructive right now. No, you have lost control. It's a horrifying thing when you've lost control and you cannot stop yourself.
Okay, so if you Google rage, the noun form does mean violent, uncontrollable anger. The verb form means feel or express violent, uncontrollable anger. So you can feel violent or uncontrollable anger.
Okay, but we're talking about deeds.
Right, which is a verb.
But yeah, okay. Now we're starting to. No, so you're trying to argue semantics and everything like that. Okay, and I'm just talking about personal experience on this and everything, and something that I can relate to, and I guess is again something that I can probably relate to with John Doe here. It's like and with Mills, and that's why I don't like Mills in this movie. I don't like his character, and you don't like somebody because you see something of yourself in them that you don't like. And that's why I don't like his character. I see too much of that uncontrolled rage. Bloodthirsty serial killer with a religious motivation aside, yeah, I could say that I admire John Doe because he has something I don't, that is control. Or rather, there's something that I didn't. So if you want to argue semantics on that and everything, I'll concede. Okay, you're right on that. But I'm saying that his emotional outbursts are still under a large level of control. He doesn't strike at the screen between him and Mills in the car. He doesn't like kick anything. Yeah, it's basically a strongly worded monologue.
I always looked at that scene in John Doe in general like a volcano. You can look at a volcano and see every now and again a little puff of smoke come out. That's letting off the steam. But underneath that calm veneer is a raging inferno. It's hot lava waiting for a trigger point for it to come out. And the interesting thing about this movie is that at no point do we really ever see violence except for the gunshots and the one time that Mills gets hit. You never see any of the murders.
Yeah, all you see is the aftermath.
Exactly. So you don't know what he was doing in those moments. It takes a certain degree of, I don't know, maybe it's not rage, but when he kicked the gluttony victim in the stomach, it kicked somebody, I mean, it was probably on the edge of bursting anyway, but to kick someone hard enough to burst their stomach, that takes a degree of strength, and sometimes that strength comes from rage. So maybe when he was younger, he had an issue with the anger and with him being able to control his angry outbursts, and that was what sort of led him down this path in the first place.
I think it can be argued that the good swift kick in the gut was like the guy wasn't dying quick enough, and he knew a good swift kick in the right spot was going to do the job.
And that could be true too. Again, we'll never really know because it's just like any other serial killer in reality. You never know what's going on in the moment.
You'll never know. But, when we think of this movie, I can sport a guess based on the behavior that they have portrayed. That's my guess. Because, again, he doesn't strike me as somebody who is out of control.
Yeah. And maybe using the description seething fury, I can see the fury underneath. Even if it's not expressed in a violent outburst, I can see that it's there. And maybe that's just me, again, reading into the character.
Yeah, possibly. But like I said, it's like he could have manipulated the crimes in any way, but he chose to be envy because he saw something that he didn't have. Okay? Not the gluttony, because obviously he was a thin, trim man and everything. He didn't envy that because he probably indulged at one time in his life, more likely than not. He didn't envy the lust because I'm sure at some point before he became what he was, he indulged. And the thing that he probably never expressed, and this is very consistent with a lot of people who don't experience maybe the type of traumas that people like me have, is that rage. That's something he never had. And that's what he chose to envy. It's just the way I see it.
Well, and the other part that he chose to envy was that normalcy because he knew he wasn't normal. He didn't have the balance. He says it's about the family. He says it's about the normal life.
Yeah, but, again, normalcy is not one of the 7 sins, so. But damn it, it should be. If you don't mind, just one thing I'd like to shift gears on, because we do talked a lot about his methodical nature John Doe's methodical nature.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing about this movie, and again, I know this is the movie now. You know, a lot of what he is that we see in this movie had to do with a lot of blind luck. There's a lot of movies like that where it's just like, you know, because I mean Civil War, Captain America Civil War, you know, the success of the villain's plan dealt with a lot of luck, people acting in a certain way. With John Doe, them finding Sloth exactly a year to the date was dependent on them deciphering what he left at the greed crime scene. What are the odds that they said that, you know, okay, they obviously wouldn't recognize that the picture's upside down, and they wouldn't look there for the fingerprints, you know? And to me, I don't know, looking at the wife with the blood stains around her eyes, it wouldn't dawn on me to say, oh, it's maybe something she's got to recognize, you know, because I'd be thinking it's like, is she a target somehow? Is it, you know, do we need to protect her?
Yeah, and they cover that because he did say he put her in the safe house.
Yeah, but they did. But that's the thing. I mean, but then, you know, it was through this thinking session, you know, during dinner when they're looking at it, and it's like, no, this is just, you know, my curiosity. There's something strange and everything, you know. And even then, when they took it and showed her the picture, she was such an emotional distress. She almost didn't say, hey, wait a minute, this picture's upside down.
Well, that was an interesting scene from the standpoint of how they got there. And I do agree with you. There was a certain degree of convenience. But by the same token, his timeline was malleable, and he even said as much when Mills and Somerset show up at his house and he ends up having to leave, and he calls him up and says, I'll have to adjust my timeline. Mm-hmm. Maybe not necessarily the 1 year to the day, you know, that just was a coincidence. It could have been just over a year ago. You know, I think that makes it seem more ominously controlled than it could have been. I don't know that it mattered to him that it happened exactly 1 year to the day. I think that was just a lucky happenstance, or could be written off as such.
Okay, well, I'll accept that. Yeah, he never did express that. Yeah, they had to be 1 year to the day. But the other point I was going to make that supported this was he ordered that phallic knife for the Lust murder, and it had to happen at a certain time, you know, like you said, malleable, but still at a certain time. Yeah, I've ordered custom stuff before, man. Sometimes it don't always come at the time you want it to come. It don't come the way you want it to be, you know. Again, he got luck. Maybe he just found the most reliable leather worker in the city. He just, you know, and again, it's just like, not everything he did, it almost, you can almost say that some of this was a team effort.
Well, again, to the leather piece, literally and figuratively, he could have ordered that 6 months ago and just said, hey, I'll pick it up when I'm ready. I don't recall the leather worker.
The proprietor of the store, I think he did, it was alluded that he had picked it up relatively recently.
No, he did say that he just picked it up recently, but he didn't say when it was done. It could have been one of those things where he's like, hey, you know, just let me know and I'll pick it up in a week or so. Again, the timeline was malleable.
Yeah.
So he had already adjusted his timeline.
I just can't help but think that if this were me perpetrating these murders and I was like, okay, I gotta go pick up the leather thing, and I get there and it's closed and I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. What?
Son of everything else. What are they doing?
What is that?
They went out of business.
And as I go back to my cousin Vinny, he was out with the flu. The whole store was out with the flu.
Yeah, that's right. They were eating grits. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah, this turned into a weird place.
Yeah. But the biggest coincidence that I saw in the movie was that Mills caught the greed murder, because he was there for sloth, or not sloth, he was there for gluttony, and then he got pulled off the case, and no one possibly could have known that. You know, there is no possible way anyone could have predicted what exact detective was going to be on what exact case. So when he shows up at the greed murder, you're like, oh, you know, that's how that works. I don't know how homicide departments are set up. I mean, I would think in the city that they tend to make it look like. And weird sidebar, and I'll bring it back. I know that this was filmed in L.A., and I know that that is Los Angeles that you see in there. But I will say I guess the cinematography, the angles that they shoot at, makes it look like it could be any city, anywhere that has just fallen into a state of decay.
Yeah, it is never alluded to exactly which city. It's just any city, USA.
Yeah, because it always makes me think of like New York, and I don't know why I have that vision of New York City in my head, but that's what it always makes me think
Yeah,
of.
because I looked at it and it's like, having, being quasi-urban explorer, I did see that and I said, yeah, that's Los Angeles. It's just, the dumpier parts of the city, but I totally saw Los Angeles.
And I never really went to the dumpier parts of LA when I lived in Long Beach, so...
Oh, we got to visit. They're
yeah.
actually fun places now. Actually, no, it's like in LA, there are not too many dumpy places downtown anymore. They've gentrified a lot of it, so...
Not gentrification.
Yeah.
And maybe Gwyneth Paltrow would have been happier there had she lived in the gentrified
Yeah,
district.
maybe. Who knows?
But what I was going to say is, I'm sure LA has more than one homicide department.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They don't operate out of one central location. So if that murder happened downtown and the other murders were happening in the outskirts, let's say, there would be no reason for Mills to be called to both of those crimes at some point. Unless someone drew the maps out and said, oh, yeah, well, the odds are it's going to be here, so it's all in one spot.
I'll ride that train with you. It's like again, any big city, too, it's like there's got to be more than just those two homicide detectives.
Well, they had a whole precinct of them. I mean, they showed them in the background.
Yeah, and that's a thing, too. A junior guy like him drawing such a high-profile case.
He did say he had an impressive record, so maybe he was just junior at the organization, at the department, not necessarily as a detective.
Yeah, again, I've never been a cop, but I
don't know.
Having Navy experience and EMS experience, sometimes it doesn't matter what you've done and where you're new to where you're at now, and they'll treat you as such.
Yeah,
So
until you figure out the way we do business.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to assume that that's the same in the police department, and so that just makes it an even bigger coincidence, or just kind of a contrived plot point to make the story go.
I know exactly. I know a former homicide detective, so maybe I'll ask him. But that, like I said, for me that was the biggest coincidence, because once you get the themes of the murders, then it would make more sense to have a lead detective to coordinate, the different departments or precincts or branches or whatever they're called, to bring all of that together and then become the lead detective, and then you follow their story. So that was the only part that I had a little bit of an issue with, but other than that, once you find that connective tissue, that involves a single team of people working towards the same end. And luckily they had Morgan Freeman on their side, who had a certain set of skills that are not Liam Neeson's, that doesn't involve hopping on a plane and flying to France, but does involve bribing FBI agents to get a printout of people that have checked out specific books at the library, thus opening the door to Cambridge Analytica swaying your political system and analyzing big data in a way that figures out who a serial killer is. Was that weirdly connected enough for you? Because I felt a little awkward at the end.
More than I was able to do, so hey.
Well, it was interesting because as I was watching the movie, and obviously we have seen this a number of times, so it's not a big surprise when he pays the FBI guy and he looks up the list of books, and that's how they get to John Doe's apartment. But what it did make me think of is, wow, that's big data right there. That is somewhere there's a searchable database that you can go, yep, all of these books have been checked out. Here's the 3 people that have done it. One's in New York, one's in LA, and one's in Missoula, Montana. So to have that data to search through in the first place is kind of scary. But when you think about how big your digital footprint is today and some of the things that are going on, Facebook recently spoke of 86 million people's data had been scraped by Cambridge Analytica. Equifax, they had a data breach of 15, 20, 30 million people.
It's just something obscene.
Yeah, the federal government, OPM, had the data of, a couple million people breached. that data is out there, and all it takes is for a connected database to be created, and you can create psychological profiles of just about anyone. And then we're talking about future crime. Then we're talking Minority Report without the psychics.
But this is where you get the plot point of Captain America the Winter Soldier with, hey man, I thought the punishment came after the crime.
It does.
Yeah. in that storyline though, that's like they had targeted people who they had a profile system going, and it's like, yeah, these are the people that we don't think that we want around anymore, and we're going to kill them before they do anything bad. And that's for the whole issue that Cap had.
Yep. Like, oh, no, you're not killing a million people just for kicks. Weird. Again, sidebar. I'm sure that I will repeat this. Stephen Strange was on that list.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't really exist as anything other than a doctor at the time.
Well, again, it's like maybe that the software was that good at predicting that he was going to be a problem.
Well, maybe it recognized that he had potential power in the mystical arts.
Or it could have been, Hydra in cahoots with something beyond, the Nazi regime and having...
With Dormammu.
Basically. The other strange movie connection I was going to make, too, it's like, you talk about this FBI database that they used to find John Doe's apartment. They were able to not quite defeat him, but hurt him because they knew something he didn't, because he didn't know about it. Because remember when the phone call is like, I don't know how you found me so quickly or something like that. He didn't know about this FBI thing, it's like, and they use it against him. And it's like, wow, that's some real Wrath of Khan stuff, because Khan didn't know about the prefix codes, and that was the only thing they had,
Yep.
It's like, you did it, Captain.
Raise the shields. Raise the shields.
I can't. Yeah, and it's like, you did it, Captain.
I do that all the time.
You did it, Captain. It's like, I did nothing. It's like, got my britches down. We defeated him because we knew something about these ships he didn't.
Yep, and that won't work again.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, one of the reasons that John Doe was able to predict the motions of the police is because while he had researched all of the references to the 7 deadly sins, one of the other books that they had mentioned that was on his shelf in his apartment was modern day police forensics procedures and all of the things that he would have to do to avoid being caught, as well as understanding what the police's next move is. Because the super cool thing about fighting the good guys, and I say it in every superhero movie when they start monologuing, is, you have to follow the rules. I don't. That is why when we see a good villain in a movie, we see a little bit of ourselves, because it is a rationale that we can appreciate, just taken to a darker place. But it's also a certain degree of envy, to borrow a phrase, for the freedom that these people have to do whatever they want without fear of repercussions.
That's basically what I touched on earlier. Again, it's, we find them fascinating because in a deep down sense, it's like we want to be them. If not necessarily the psychopath or bloodthirsty serial killer, but, that level of freedom.
Yeah, we just want to do what we want to do without having sometimes to worry about the consequences.
I think that's probably what most people find annoying is consequences. But that's for another discussion. But, something I've noticed or anything, we've talked about how much we love this movie and how great we think it is. I think we've pretty much clearly demonstrated that because we did this podcast a little differently than we did every other one for the last 25 episodes.
Really?
You did not ask how this ended up on our shelves.
We did not.
Because I think deep down inside, it's kind of a default. We know why it ended up on our shelves. It's there because we love this movie. So why bother asking?
Yeah, I gotta say, good catch. I completely skipped that. We did kind of ask how it stood up on a rewatch, but no, I didn't even ask if you owned it, because I know that's occasionally been a thing back and forth, but I kind of knew you did already. So, yeah, how did this end up on your shelf? Let's just cover it now. Good catch.
Well, I think we've said it already. We've driven it home. This is a great movie that has great rewatchable value.
It's because I love this movie.
Yeah, it's because I love this movie, and I found a really great edition. That has a lot of great special features on it, a lot of explorations, documentaries.
I don't have that. I have the original DVD when it was first released on DVD.
I had that one.
And much like the older DVD that we just watched, the Robin Hood one, I had to flip this thing over in the middle too, because I did the same thing. I put the DVD in, started the movie halfway through. I'm like, what's going, did I start? Oh, no, don't tell me. Because I have a couple that are widescreen on one side and pan and scan on the other. So, I wasn't sure which one this was. But when I put it in, got halfway through, or you started the movie in the middle, I'm like, oh, never mind, that's one of these.
That is the edition I had originally owned, because when it first came out on DVD, again, it was like that, yeah, I've got to have it type of thing.
I think this is actually one of the first DVDs I ever bought.
I don't know.
I think it was this, A Bronx Tale. I'm trying to remember. I know A Bronx Tale was in there. Pulp Fiction, that was on there, because, again, I had to buy like 4 DVDs. Or I got 4 free DVDs when I bought the DVD player. And I got this one, Pulp Fiction, A Bronx Tale, and I cannot for the life of me remember what the 4th one was. But I'm reasonably certain when I find the DVD that I had to flip over, I'll know.
Funny thing is, I don't remember what all the DVDs I bought, the first ones I bought, because I remember where I bought them. I don't know if you remember Incredible Universe in San Diego.
Mm-hmm. I used to love that store.
Oh, yeah. I bought the DVD player there, and it was like that thing. It's like, oh yeah, buy some DVDs with it. And I bought a few, and all I remember was The Crow was one of them. I don't remember what the others were.
The Crow. Interesting movie, The Crow.
Yeah.
Speaking of The Crow, which we weren't, or we were rather, which ironically, which is so weird, it made me think of Ernie Hudson, who was in that movie. Which made me think of Rock, the guy from Mimic.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he's in this movie. He is in Seven.
Yeah. He plays a little cameo.
Yep, as is Morgan Freeman's son, which I did not know.
What scene?
He was the fingerprint guy. When he said, yeah, you guys kind of want to go wait somewhere else. It was interesting to look at the cast because there were the guy that in the Lust murder, he always looks familiar to me. For some reason, I can always point him out in other shows. And you're like, oh, hey, it's that guy.
Yeah, he's another one of those, that guy in that film.
Mm-hmm. Who generally plays the same squirrely kind of guy. Not in this one in particular, but, he is a squirrely kind of dude who goes and
freaks out.
Yeah. And again, one of the things that I'm kind of enjoying about doing this podcast is looking things up about these movies. But the other piece is when I look things up, sometimes it kind of is like, oh, well, that's kind of not very exciting. But in this particular case, that guy stayed up for 2 straight days, amongst other things. I mean, was just strung out on coffee and Red Bull, I guess, just so he could get the right measure of stressed, panicked, freaked out tone in his voice to pull off that bit. And I thought he did fantastic. I think he should have got a Best Extra with Lines Oscar if they had one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I always find intriguing about that scene is when they ask him about the girl, he doesn't even register that he just killed somebody. He's thinking about it. I mean, it's sort of assumed, I suppose. But everything is about, he tried to kill me, and I had to do this thing. So you have to wonder about the psychology of that, because if you're in that position, and it's kill or be killed, what's your choice? And this is not just shoot somebody or stab somebody. This is mutilate them with an act that you used to find pleasurable, because I'm pretty sure he's going to have issues in the future. That has to take a strong understanding of psychology, and I don't know if that's something that you could say most people would understand. I think if you're going to put somebody in a position where they are pursuing something of questionable morality, such as sex with prostitutes like that, then I don't want to cast aspersions, because I don't really care what you do. I mean, sex is legal, selling's legal. I don't see any reason why selling sex shouldn't be legal, but, that's just me. And I'm quoting George Carlin.
Well, not really. You're paraphrasing George Carlin.
I say, okay, I'm paraphrasing. I quoted without the cursing, I suppose.
That's still paraphrasing.
Yeah, I know. I'm kidding. But from movie standpoint, from Seven standpoint, he was already a questionable moral character, so it's not difficult to understand that he would make the choice that he did, which is to not just kill the girl, but really not even acknowledge her existence when confronted with the act. He was still stressing. It's completely understandable. He was still freaked out. Again, completely understandable. And from a crime standpoint, when I was stationed in San Diego in, called the 89, 90 time frame. No, it would have been 89, 90, 91, somewhere in there. I was dating a girl who was in a play in downtown San Diego, and it was called Non-Human Crimes, NHC, and it was about a string of dead prostitutes that basically the police had dismissed as non-human crimes.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it's kind of understandable that a person in that position could not even think about that prostitute as a human.
I remember you talking about that. I don't know if it was at the same time I read the book The Alienist, which talked about something similar. It took place in 19th century? Yeah, 19th century New York, where somebody was a serial killer killing, orphan boys or whatever. And yeah, the police didn't really think it was that important. But I think they made a TV series about it with Dakota Fanning.
They did. It's on TNT.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, me neither.
It was a fascinating book. But yeah, a lot of the same attitudes. Yeah, the non-human crimes.
Yeah, it's actually kind of sad. I mean, that was one of the things that I did like about Somerset's and Mills's characters, was they didn't dismiss the prostitute as expendable, if you will. Like, who's the girl? Who's the blonde? She looks like a pro. Like, yeah, she does. But they were still concerned. And even Somerset, who is supposed to be this apathetic character, as we spoke of earlier, in the very beginning of the movie, what's the first question that he asks? Did the kids see it?
I do remember that now, yeah.
So he cares. It's in there,
Yeah.
as much as he tries to put on the affected apathy.
Well, I think that's the beauty of movies and everything. There's that one question that most people would probably dismiss, but told us everything we need to know about them if you just paid attention.
Exactly. I was having a conversation about Blade Runner 2049 with another friend of mine. I think we've had this conversation too. But there was a point in the movie where there's a question that's asked, and you're like, well, there you go. That is the entire theme of the movie right there. In 2 seconds, you have expressly stated the theme of the movie. As soon as he asked the question, I was like, oh, yep, there you go. That's the most important question in the movie.
So what was the question?
I'm not going to spoil it for when we review Blade Runner 2049.
Okay. All right. Well, since we're going to cut it off there, it's like we were talking about little bits of trivia in the movie, too. One of the little interesting trivia facts I found, which I did not know until preparing for this podcast, that the actors who were portraying the SWAT team on the Sloth murder were not told that the victim was going to still be alive. So when you see
so that was a genuine
when you see their reaction of shock and terror when he starts in bed, that's genuine. Which
wow.
Yeah, which really lends to sometimes the cruelty of movie makers, especially in horror movies, it's like, wow, when they want a genuine reaction of fear, they don't rely on an actor's ability. They make sure they scare the shit out of them.
Yeah, you have to have a certain cruel streak in you to do some of these things.
Have you heard of the horror stories that Kubrick used to put his actors through when he was filming The Shining?
No, The Shining was never really one of my favorite movies, so...
Yeah, he literally abused Shelley Duvall.
Oh, I did hear something about that.
But on a lot...
I think that's why she got out of acting in general, wasn't it? Or
I don't know if that was the actual thing, but it would not surprise me.
I know she did do Popeye.
But then on the lighter side of that behavior, the movie The Descent, about the female spelunkers getting trapped in the cave.
Okay, yep.
The scene when you first see the creature in the night vision camera, Again, didn't tell the actors that was going to happen. They just said, okay, act scared, look around the camera, and action. And they turned around, and one of the guys in the creature costume snuck in the dark and stood behind the actor. So when they focused in on it and freaked out, that was real. And they didn't even wait. They didn't even wait
Wow.
for the director to say cut. They booked out of the set. So, and then, yeah, up until that point, they had never seen the creatures. They just said, yeah, eventually in this movie you're going to see creatures. They didn't know what they look like. So it was, yeah, the cruelty of some filmmakers.
Yeah, that's yeah. The guy that played the sloth victim, they asked him if he could lose a little more weight for the role. Like, he already weighed like 98 pounds.
You know, something else that's like, now that we bring up the sloth character, and it's something that I just kind of put that back in my mind, and I guess, since we're getting there on time. Have you noticed the pictures that they looked at of the sloth victim, and they, when the top of the stack was like the oldest pictures, and they, scrolled through them, and they said, oh, it's been a year to the date and everything, and of course the more recent pictures were at the bottom. But if you ever really looked at the scene, the man already looked like shit.
Oh, yeah.
So was he already being worked on, or is that the way John Doe found him?
That was the way John Doe found him. He said he was on meth or something. He was a drug-doing dude.
Oh, okay.
And not one of the, you can sit on a couch and eat Doritos and crap drugs. I mean, this was, like meth or something.
Yeah, because like I said, preparing for this podcast, I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, I don't know if I really put much thought into it, but damn, man, he looks terrible already. It didn't like John Doe really didn't have to do much to him.
Yeah, I did not know that this opened the day I turned 25, September 22nd, 1995.
Did you think that this movie would be so important to you when you first saw it?
Yeah, I think I did. And I say that because usually when I see a movie for the first time, I don't usually have to go see it again to appreciate it. But I will say, in this particular movie, I did not appreciate Brad Pitt as an actor until a few years later. And I'm still not a big Brad Pitt fan, but I think he's actually brilliant in this movie because of what he does to play the everyman, to play sort of the guy who wants to just solve crimes, just like you do in the movies. He just wants to frickin' find the clue and catch the bad guy and go home and Bob's your uncle. That's what he wants to do. He wants to mete out the justice. And I didn't appreciate that for a while. And it just took a couple of conversations with a couple of friends. And I said, no, he had to be that way. Because in order for us to, get that perspective to see, like I talked about earlier, the triangle bit, it's how he had to play the character. And he did it brilliantly. Now I look at it and say that, but at the time I was a little perturbed by it. So this is one of the few movies that I've seen in my life that I liked a lot when I first saw it, but I grew to appreciate it even more the farther along it's been. So more and more I find little things in there that I just think are so neat.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have a different view of Brad Pitt as an actor, ever since Fight Club and other movies, it's like, but I still don't like his character in this one. I mentioned why. No, doesn't bear repeating, but
yeah. Sometimes the Department of Tautology calls and sends their representatives from the Department of Redundancy Department.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things in there. And again, since we're kind of talking about trivia and Brad Pitt's character, there is the point where they're looking at the list of books, and Brad Pitt actually says it. He says in character, I think he just mispronounced it. He said the Marquis de Sade. It was actually a goof. I mean, he actually just accidentally mispronounced it. But at the time, Sade, the singer, had been around for a good long time, so it was kind of it was not outside of the realm of possibility that someone would mispronounce the name like that.
Yeah.
But I guess Morgan Freeman wanted to reshoot that. Because he said, look, not even Mills is that dumb. Like, nope, we're leaving it in. Very well, then. And one of the other, again, subtle things in this movie is that whole split, that social dichotomy that we see in play today is the rural versus the urban. When when we talked to Gwyneth Paltrow, who did a great job in this movie. And if you want to talk about actresses that I'm not generally fond of, Gwyneth Paltrow's on that list. She does good stuff sometimes, but I do not appreciate her Goop website and some of the crap that she shills. So, but anyway, the difference in, again, that urban, moving from either at least the suburbs, but it's implied that they lived in a more rural setting, to this pit of urban decay. I think she did a great job emotionalizing, if you will, that struggle to try and look, this is what my husband wants to do, and I want to support him. When we were high school sweethearts, and it's kind of that stereotype thing, which again goes to what John Doe would envy, is that little, that sweet American dream of marrying your childhood sweetheart, and he's out there, being Serpico, trying to, catch the bad guys and stuff. So it really was a well executed interaction, and just a really well written script. I mean, at the very least. So and well acted.
I agree.
Yeah, we've kind of covered a lot of trivia and stuff, and I think we've explored this movie to my satisfaction. I know I could talk about this movie all day. There's just so much to dive into.
Yeah, that's the one thing, again, prepping for this was there is so much detail. I didn't want this to be an exercise in being pedantic, so I just, pick the best parts, talk about emotions, just a little bit of trivia.
Yeah.
But I understand that. We barely scratched the surface. There's so much of this movie that we could have talked about.
Yeah, it's not a movie of the week. It is actually something that you could talk about for, years.
Which
and we have.
When you talk about, movie villains who were right, in the sense that John Doe talked about that people would talk about this for years and years to come, and yeah.
And here we are.
Here we are, years and years later.
Very,
Still.
in the current term, meta. One of the other things that I did want to tackle before we start to wrap this up and talk about where this belongs on our shelf is the intro. During my research, I discovered that this intro scene with the remix of Nine Inch Nails' Closer and the notebooks and the fingertip trimming, cutting off his fingerprints and stuff like that, that had never really been done in that style before, so this is the first movie that did that, and I think that sets the scene for this entire movie, because this goes to a little bit of what I'd talked about earlier about that volcano analogy, about the seething rage underneath and controlling the rage, and, again, controlling the uncontrollable, but the beats in the very beginning of this movie with the music and the intro are controlled and measured in such a way as they feel like they want to explode. They give you that sense of tension, like you're waiting for this just explosion of just violent, almost rage metal or whatever.
Well,
but it stays slow and pressured the entire time, and it kind of sets you up for who John Doe is.
Yeah, and I think they found the perfect composer to express that. And Trent Reznor, the front man of Nine Inch Nails, and probably the only original member of Nine Inch Nails to still be part of Nine Inch Nails. But no, yeah, his music composition has been with me, because he was me for a lot of time. And again, going back to knowing rage and knowing emotional problems and everything, that his music spoke to me, as he probably did to a lot of people. So yeah, for him to control that rage, because a lot of his music was rage filled. Mm-hmm. It depicted rage in a lot of different ways. So for him to tone it down and to show that level of control, and as the way you described it, that control, that containment, yeah, that's just his genius.
And I thought, again, just watching this movie from the beginning, which, like I said earlier, I usually catch it in the middle and watch it through to the end. In that way, this movie is very much like Shawshank Redemption. I can just pick that movie up in the middle and watch it until the end and go, yep, I love this movie. So, spoiling my review for the Shawshank Redemption when we get there. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on the music for a minute. particularly in the intro. And that's really when you see the notebooks, and you can see that there is writing in there, which goes back to what I'd said earlier. So those kind of a couple of the things that I found in there. I wonder if you could buy those notebooks. I'm actually curious as to what was actually written in there. No one went through and said this is what he wrote, but it was actual stuff. It wasn't just random words. He was actually writing things.
You probably have to know somebody in the property department.
I know a guy in L.A. Maybe we could drive down somewhere, find out who did it.
Hey, just give us a couple hours with the notebooks. Make it worth your while.
All right. But that was actually pretty much the last thing that I wanted to cover. So did you have anything else?
No, like I said, if you don't have it, I really recommend getting the special 2-disc edition.
I wanted to go out and pick up the Blu-ray. I think that came out in 2010.
Well, I don't know about the Blu-ray, and again, it's since we talk about movies on our shelves and everything, that is an aspect that we should talk about. I don't think I want this in Blu-ray. I don't want this in high def. I want this grainy. I want this gritty. This is the kind of movie that's made for low def.
But I wonder if they upconvert it. And I agree. This is the kind of movie that, because of the setting, the rain, just the gritty, grimy nature of the city, it should be like that. It should be grainy. It should be shot in.
That's the thing. Before I developed that attitude, it's like for Blade Runner, I was very happy that they didn't completely upgrade the definition. Mm-hmm. The opening sequence, the cityscape, that was in high def. The interview scene that followed right after the opening sequence, still grainy, still had that film noir feel to it. Yeah. And so it was a nice hybrid and everything. And when I finally developed that sense of what needs to be low def and what needs to be high def, I was very happy they did it that way. I don't know if they did that in the Blu-ray version of 7. Don't care. Gonna keep my gritty DVD.
Okay, fair enough.
But so like I said, I was going to say that I was going to go on to elaborate on the 2-disc. If you look at it on Amazon, be sure, you look up the special edition 2-disc. It's just a plain black box on the outside with the 7 logo where the B is replaced by the number 7. But if you take it out, it looks like one of the old notebooks that John Doe wrote in.
Oh, cool.
And there's actually a couple of pages of his writing, or the character's writing in there. I mean, just looks like random pages. I'm sure if I were to look a little deeper, there are pages that mean something. It's a great DVD edition. The art design is spot on with the movie, and just visually just looks great. It's a wonderful part of your collection.
I will look that up.
$22.97 on Amazon.
Very well then. So once I bought this on Amazon, I will tell you that it would go on my top shelf. This is, for me, a top shelf movie. It is one of my favorites. It's one of the best character-driven psychological thrillers. I can't say enough good things about this movie. It's definitely near the leading edge of the top shelf for me personally.
Yeah, for me it goes with that special place that's not quite top shelf, but the box sets that have a special place. Not quite general population, but not quite top shelf. That little special grouping.
Okay, I'm kind of shocked. I would have thought this would have been from a beloved film that I know you enjoy.
I can't bring myself to have it share the shelf with Pink Floyd The Wall and Blade Runner, but it goes right below them.
Okay, I see, and I would put it maybe not Pink Floyd The Wall. I'm not as big a fan of that movie as you are, but I again, it's top shelf for me, so I love it. Well, it's time to push the button. So let's do that.
Ooh,
push it.
I'm just it made me think of that one episode of Big Bang Theory where they were doing karaoke and Leonard was just doing it way over the top. Push it real good.
Yeah. All right, let's find out what the movie is, and here we go.
Rock of Ages.
So, do you want the extended edition or the theatrical edition?
I guess I'll watch the extended edition, whatever's on Amazon streaming, because obviously I don't own it.
You don't? Shocked. All right, so Rock of Ages, extended edition. So, again, listeners, let us know your thoughts on the movie Seven. Scroll through our Facebook page, take a look at what Jeff thought. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit, but he expounds a little bit more on the Facebook page. And that is already mentioned. It's a Facebook page. We'll review it ourselves. You can email us at wrios2016@gmail.com. And again, just to remind you, if you want to hear your own voice electronically produced on the internet, you can use your voice memo functionality on most smartphones, if not all, and email us an audio file, and we will definitely play it on the podcast. We appreciate your feedback, and we appreciate your listener inputs into our listener-selected movies. Again, it'll be a little bit longer before we do that, just 27, 28, 29. So 3 or 4 more movies from now will be listener-selected the first time we do that. And we're looking forward to that. At least I am. It'd be kind of interesting to maybe get a little more listener feedback, or we can try and ask some questions on the Facebook page and see what people say. And with that, join us in 2 weeks for Rock of Ages Extended Edition. Dan, do you have a movie-themed goodbye?
What is it? Dead dog. I didn't do that.
I love that scene. All right. Thanks again, and see you in 2 weeks.